Hey guys, and welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, the first podcast to bring you the local offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. We got a great fishing report lined up for you guys this week, but first let's hear who's making the show possible. The 2024 Monarch Cobia Classic. The ODU Alumni Association is hosting the ultimate cobia fishing tournament July 11th, 12th, and 13th. All tournament events are happening at the beautiful ODU Sailing Center with spacious parking for both your truck and trailer. The captain's meeting is Thursday, July 11th, and the hunt for the big one begins Friday and Saturday, followed by awards, food, and drink at the dock party on Saturday night. It's only $400 for early registration. After July 1st, that price goes up to $450. And if all else fails, you can even register at the captain's meeting. This year, we've added a weigh station at Wallace's Bait and Tackle in Hampton, as well as Long Bay Point Marina in Virginia Beach. Compete for cash prizes with 3 Calcutta levels, as well as 1st through 5th places, heaviest fish, and the Lucky Dog prize. There are even merchandise prizes for our women and youth anglers. All proceeds support the ODU Alumni Association Scholarship Fund and ODU alumni programming. To find out more, visit them on Facebook at Monarch Cobia Classic, as well as the links in the show notes. Listen up, folks. AFTCO has a new promotion for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. I especially enjoy their hooded sun protection shirts, as well as their Seiko fluorocarbon. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. Again, just text the letters LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all joining me this week. I am your host, Luke Barton. It's been a beautiful day here in Virginia Beach. And this show, it's a new addition to the Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network. And the purpose of this show is to bring a weekly offshore, nearshore, and inshore fishing report to anglers in our area, connecting folks with local charter guides that will be contributing their local knowledge each week about what's happening in our local waters. We also want this platform to promote sustainable fishing practices to preserve this world-class fishery for the next generation. All right, guys, we're going to welcome back to the show Captain Colton North with Litigator. Captain Colt, how are we doing, brother?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing good, man. So I'm excited to dive into a little bit of offshore. I know recently you took a couple of trips down there and went out to see what you could see, maybe chasing some tunas. What'd you guys see and get into?
Yeah, we it was all right. We had really good weather. I've been blessed with some great weather this spring. I don't know, there's all sorts of life out there lately. Pilot whales, dolphins, haven't seen a lot of flying fish, but plenty of life as far as larger species go. We went out, like I said, weather was nice. We went out in search of tunas. We knew that the trolling bite was kind of hit or miss. A lot of early morning bites, and then it's been switching over to needing to fly a kite later in the day, which is usually it's due to flying fish and hotter summer temperatures and the types of bait that are around, and we call them leader shy fish. It's another reason we'll throw up a kite. Yeah, we went out there expecting to catch some tunas, and we started off trolling.
Very cool. Did you get into any tunas? What did you guys actually get into?
Yeah, the last couple of trips, we've caught a handful of fish trolling in the morning. I want to say 1 or 2. The best day we had was 4. I actually went 3 or 4 times offshore in the last week and a half. 2 weeks. Yeah, we caught some fish early trolling, and then the bite had shut down around 9 or 10 for us, and then we threw up the kite. And my last trip, we had a lot of fun using the kite. Ended up catching 3 nice tunas on the kite.
Oh, very cool. So when you're throwing up the kite, are you using just the tension on the line and the wind as you're moving the boat along, or do you guys use a helium balloon? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, so we just use the tension of the line and the wind. It turns trolling. Usually you go offshore, you think about trolling, you think about just kind of contour lines or driving around looking for what you're marking in certain depths. And with kite fishing, it's a little different. It's like sailing a sailboat. So we almost me and my mate will talk back and forth with each other about when I need to tack or turn, and kind of got to drive the boat, even though it has motors, as if it was a sailboat, because you've got that kite up behind the boat. And you just take time, whatever way the wind's working, you work east to west or north to south, you play the wind right, you drag your baits over the area where the fish are and you're marking them, and hopefully they come up and give you a bite.
And are you working those leaders? Are you doing anything, to give action to those baits to make them dance on the surface under that kite?
Yeah, if you need to, we definitely have done it. Luckily, we've actually had enough wind. It's been blowing 10 to 15 in that like mid morning, 10, 11, 12 time frame to where the kite itself and the boat rocking down does all the jigging for us.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And so I remember last time that you were on talking about offshore fishing, just kind of how important some of those water temperatures were. When you guys had success this last week or so, what temperatures were you finding the most bait and bites in?
Yeah, so actually that water pushed in, the water's constantly moving based on time of year and wind direction. The water had pushed in, it was still a real mixed blue and green water. It wasn't really your perfect, ideal looking, blue water you talk about seeing offshore, but it wasn't green either. It was like 72 to 74 degrees. And we caught fish within the rain. I think our first couple bites trolling were in like 70 degrees, and our kite bites were closer to 75. It ended up pushing in as the day went on.
Okay, very cool. And then, in terms of your trolling speed, even with the kite behind you, like what's kind of that, right range to be at?
Yeah, so I'm kind of new to it, and I was told by a couple buddies that fish down there more than I do. The kite bite actually, like I guess it's like anything. Some days you can go faster, and some days you can go slower, and you'll find that makes the fish bite a little better. But I found that when I sped up my troll a little bit, it made those baits look a little more natural. They were hopping out the water a little more. I learned that when you're kite fishing, you don't want your baits dragging in the water or really even on the surface like you would a trolling bait. You
Hmm.
actually want hopping in and out of the water. So if your bait spends 10, 15 seconds in the air, it's not the end of the world because that's such a natural presentation for those baits to be doing.
That kind of makes sense. I'm thinking about it. It's almost like it's coming in, it's like splashing in and out of the water, which is going to be, both a visual, disturbance in the water for a fish to see as well as an audible disturbance in the water. So you mentioned that some of these bites, it was semi good in the morning trolling bite. What did you guys do when things slowed down?
Well, we stuck with it. Some days are good, some days are bad. You really got to just keep fishing to find out. And most of the times, the last cruise I've had are really persistent about wanting to keep tuna fishing. So we did what I think a lot of other people have spent plenty of time doing, and we trolled around and caught nothing for 4 or 5 hours until we changed something up.
Oh man, I know that can be tough, but I think the reward at the end when you stick to it and get those bites, definitely worth it. We talked a little bit about earlier on the phone. You mentioned there was a kind of a unique bite that you guys found with some of those blue line tiles. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So another alternative to when the fishing is slow and you get tired of driving around for hours with no action is to find some bottom fishing grounds. And I'm kind of new to fishing offshore for bottom fish. I've only done it for a couple of years now, but I've gotten the knack of it, or I've gotten the hang of it, I say. And I look for like a 250 to 300 foot area. I look for muddy bottom, and it sounds like, oh, how would you know that? It's not like you can see it down there, but
Mm.
I guess I'll explain my exact method. I look for the right depth, and then I look for the right bottom. So I look for spread out contour lines on my map. What when you're looking at a Garmin or your electronics offshore, when you've got spread out contour lines, that means you're typically over top of a flatter bottom. So once you find that flatter bottom, what we'll do is we'll drop down our electrics first to save our arms and backs. And we'll make sure that when that weight hits the bottom, it's going to sink into the mud because tilefish and sea bass and species like that, well, mainly tilefish, the blue lines, they actually burrow in the mud and they don't move too far from where they start. They just have these little holes, and I guess they grow up in them as far as I know. And once you find that area, you kind of stay on them and you just do drifts. And when you start getting bites, mark the area, and that way I can figure out exactly where those little locations are of the fish. And we just went drifting. We used, I didn't come very prepared, but luckily, since we didn't have too many trolling bites, I had some extra ballyhoos on the boat. So we chopped them up, put them on some hooks, and found some fish. And then we broke out the vertical jigs on the lighter tackle to make it a little bit more fun.
Man, that's cool. And talk about being resourceful too. I mean, it sounds like you didn't really have a whole bunch of ideal baits for bottom fishing, but you guys figured out a way to make it work. And it sounds like you got a couple of nice blue line tiles to take a ride home on the bed of ice.
Yeah. We ended up killing a limit of blue lines and probably 15 or 20 sea bass up to 5 or 6 pounds.
Man, that's cool to hear. And it was really neat to hear you talk about the Garmins and just kind of, how you're looking at those contour lines. Any tips or tricks for, they obviously come with all the default things turned on. Like when it comes to dialing in your electronics for offshore fishing and looking at, contour lines, like are there any little tips or tricks for those listening that, you would recommend to do maybe outside of the defaults?
Yeah, I keep it standard. I don't know exactly which transducers I'm running. I'd have to look because I don't actually spend a ton of time on that boat.
Hmm.
The offshore, and I'd have to look at what those are, but I do know that I have it set when I'm bottom fishing and whatnot. I zoom into the bottom so I can really see. Obviously, if you don't want if you want to fish mud, you don't want there to be rocks. So you can zoom in
Ah,
on. There's ways to do that. Like I don't know. I think you click on the area and zoom, zoom, zoom. I'd have to be holding one or looking at one in front of me to
yeah.
exactly how to do it. But yeah, there are absolutely settings you can use. And I'll be 100% honest. I kind of figured out and know what I'm doing, but I didn't learn because anyone showed me. I learned by a couple of guys basically telling me, "Hey, look for this depth and make sure it's muddy." And I kind of just sent it and did it. And over the course of 2 years down there and plenty of offshore trips, I just kind of figured out what I was looking for.
Man, that's cool to hear. I think that's just a testament to, the fisherman in you that just you kind of have an idea of the outcome that you're looking for and you just keep poking and playing until you figure it out and get that hookup. So, man, my hat's off to you for that. But I know, you're back home. You're not down south right now. There's plenty of cobias to chase, and you guys are going to be switching gears on Litigator from doing that offshore stuff to, kicking off your season here with cobia. So, when do you guys start your cobia trips?
Tomorrow. This we're talking now. I think it's June 12th. Tomorrow's June 13th. I've got a couple catch and release trips with some repeat clients of mine, and then June 15th, I'm booked all the way through. Heck, mid-July right now, I think, and we'll be at it every single day.
Awesome, man. I know you guys run two different boats. You run the Intrepid, and then you also
Yep.
have that privateer as well. Both have amazing captains on board. They're going to put you on some fish. So if folks want to get up with Litigator and get booked, maybe later in July and into August and September, what's going to be the best way for folks to get up with you and book a trip?
Yeah, just hit me with a text or call at 757-345-9698. You can also be reached by email at litigatorsportfishing.com. And I always post constantly on my social medias, Facebook and Instagram, and all those are just Litigator Sport Fishing.
Awesome. So we can find you on social media at Litigator Sport Fishing. Hit that email or that phone number. Guys, that
Yep.
was a great offshore report talking with Captain Colton North from Litigator Sport Fishing. We're going to take a quick break. Y'all stick around. Hilton's offshore charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys. Well, welcome back. We are talking with our good friend Captain Jack Limroth on King Tide Charters. Captain Jack, how are we doing today, brother?
Doing well. How you doing?
Good, man. I'm excited to have you back on the show and talk a little bit. Since the last time we talked, the fishing season has kicked off. So far, it's looked like a really great season. And talk to us a little bit about, your last couple trips, some of the things that you guys have been seeing and targeting. What you been catching?
Yeah, so kind of as the season is transitioned from migration season towards more traditional fishing in the bay, cobia have found their home for the summer behind the bridge, and we've been fishing anywhere from, you know, 2, 3 sets out on the ocean side all the way up towards the anchored ships. Fishing's been solid. A lot of boats on the weekends, more than normal for preseason, but the fish have been cooperative this week. They were really lockjaw last week, but for some reason, I don't know if the moon cycle shifted or something, but they seem to be back into bucktails this week. So that's been good. Other than that, ocean front, we've been catching a bunch of drum, and with the calm seas, we've been doing a lot of sheepshead fishing against the bridge.
You mentioned moon a second ago, and I don't know if you dig into that too much. I haven't myself, but when you mention moon, like what's the first things that come to your mind when you consider the moon phase and how that may or may not affect the fishing in terms of how active they might eat or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not super prolific in like thinking about it or looking at it much, but I think that, I know 2 weeks ago, I think it was probably about 2 weeks ago, was the new moon. and the current was crazy strong. And I know the drum fishing, we had really good drum fishing both in the daytime and at night, but then the cobias didn't want to bite. And then all of a sudden, as the new moon rolled over, the currents have slowed down a bunch. And I don't totally know why, but the fish have started biting. So maybe like a mid-cycle in between the new and the full might have them biting a little better. Sometimes people think that with the stronger like moon solunar tables, they'll feed at night or won't feed. Different types of fish are reacted. I know people are big on it with trout.
I've heard that too, and I've even heard talk of moon phase with even hunting, like deer hunting and whatnot. Yeah, so
totally,
I'm sure there has to be some correlation between those two things. I mean, when you look at like a new moon and how that affects the tides, how does that work? What does it create with the tide cycles? A new moon versus a mid cycle or full moon?
So, to my knowledge, which is a little limited, I know that just different cycles throughout the moon will have a bigger gravitational pull. So I know that full moons and new moons will have a higher, like a stronger tide. So I mean, we were drum fishing over on the shoals during the new moon. I think it was the day before the new moon, and the current had to have been like 5 knots. It was the craziest outgoing I've ever seen, almost to the point where it was unfishable. And then you go back like 4 or 5 days later, and the tide cycle has just shifted, and it's half a knot at full flow. So
right,
I'm not super into it with the summertime fishing, but I know that just as there's different cycles, the gravitational pull increases or decreases, at which, if the fish are still trying to hang out at the bridge at night and they're working too hard in the current, maybe they want to feed during the day, or just depending on what they're doing when we're not looking at them will impact how they act when we are looking at them.
Yeah. And, as you're mentioning that, I'm thinking about when I look at like my tide chart, for example, and you can see, if the tide chart's going to start at like maybe minus 0.5, and then at the highest point, it's going to be at 3 feet, that might be a larger tide swing, which might indicate we're in more of a new moon cycle or whatnot. And then it's like, you can almost think of it like pouring water out of a cup. The longer, the more volume of water that has to get poured out is probably going to increase the tide speed as it's moving, in or out of the bay. And, several captains that we've talked to on the show talk about how, the fish do seem to feed more during a moving tide. So it does make sense or stand to reason that when we're looking at instances where fish are biting more or biting less, we might start to make a mental note of like, hey, why don't I go ahead and check the moon phase and just see what it's at, and maybe start to put that in my little fishing diary to, try to make some simulations to either A, be able to target some ideal fishing conditions, or B, when you have that day that just drives you nuts, you can give yourself some like solace by looking at the moon face and go, oh, okay, it was a bad mood time. Yeah. That's why I'm not a terrible fisherman. It's just a bad moon.
Set up for failure.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you guys were targeting some sheep's head. I think a lot of folks are really interested in that species for a couple of reasons. They do put up a good fight from what I've heard and seen, and I understand they're pretty good to eat. But for guys like me who've really never spent any time targeting sheep's head, talk me through some of the basics. If I'm going to go out there and target sheep's head, what are some of the first couple of things that I need to make sure I've got in my tackle box, and be, make sure that I've got on the boat with me?
Yeah. So I recently, I guess last summer, I started getting into the sheep's head pretty big. Now, as often as I can do it, I like to do it. I would say the starter kit would be, you want to try and get either some blue crab, fiddler crabs, mud crabs, sometimes shrimp, sand fleas, really any kind of crustacean that you can get on your hands on that's fresh. And the two main ways that people target them rig wise would either be using a dropper loop, which, if you know what a dropper loop is, you tie a loop at the bottom and a loop about 5-6 inches up, put a small 1 or 2 hook on the top loop, and put not an egg sinker, just like a diamond sinker or whatever on the bottom. Or you can use a jig, which has become increasingly popular. If you want to get your jigs, shout out Chong Che, give him a call. He's got some good jigs. He hooked me up last week, and we've been putting them to work this week. So those jigs, 1 to 2.5 ounces. And what you want to do is, if you have a trolling motor, great. That is super ideal for keeping you in the lee of the bridge, but you want to keep the tip of your rod as close to the piling as possible. Those fish are sitting down current, or if it's light current, you can fish on either side. But what they're looking to do is eat the little crabs off of the poles or the shrimp or whatever they can. And if that jig or dropper loop isn't within a few inches of the piling, you're probably not going to get a bite. So you just want to position the boat to where you can have the tip of your rod right in the lee, and we'll start it about 5-6 feet under the boat and hold it there for about 30 seconds. If you go to get a bite, or if you think you have a bite, let it sit until sometimes you'll feel a little tap, and you don't want to set on the tap. If you set on the tap, you're probably not going to catch them. What you want to wait for is either the line swimming off the pole or a heavy weight that starts pulling down, and then you want to stick up on them. But if you don't get a bite at the first weight or the first depth, I usually give it 30 seconds or so, drop it to 10 feet, and then 15, 20, all the way till you get to the bottom, and then slowly work your way back up.
So you mentioned lee a couple of times. So if I'm on the bridge, how do I determine what the lee side of the bridge is?
Yeah, the way that the current is moving. So if you're staring at the bridge and the current is coming out, the lee is going to be on the ocean side of each pole. So you're looking where the current, if you look at the current, and it's not always east-west. It's, sometimes if you've ever been in the bay, that sometimes there's no slack. The current just kind of does a 360 and it'll be going north-south or whatever. But essentially there is a slack point right in the middle of the pole where the current flows. And wherever that is, you want to find the down current side. So on the incoming, it's going to be pushing on the bay side of the pole, and on the outgoing, it's going to be on the ocean side.
And that almost creates like a little eddy on the backside of the pole where maybe the current's not as strong, and you can get that bait down to those different depths without it getting swept completely out away from, like you were saying. So that bait literally needs to be within 6 inches, 8 inches of that pole all the way down in order to potentially be seen by a sheep's head.
Yeah, they're not, especially when the current picks up, they get kind of stacked up in the eddy because they don't want to use their energy to stay on the outsides of the pole. So really, they're sitting there just picking away in the eddy. And if your bait is, swung back a few feet, then you're probably not. I mean, you might get lucky every once in a while, but for the most part, if you feel your jig or your sinker rubbing up against the piling, you're in the right spot.
Got it. And you mentioned, a spot lock or trolling motor. I know I've seen some folks tying off to the bridge. Is that legal to tie your boat off to the bridge?
No, it's not. It's actually a much bigger deal than just a ticket. I don't know what it is, but I know it's some kind of misdemeanor and you got to go to court for it. So if you are planning to tie up, make sure you keep your eyes open, but I would not recommend doing it. I know plenty of people that have gotten busted for it. If you go, I know Ocean's East, I just picked up 2 of them. They're these Fenwick rods that are made for salmon, and they're 10 and 11 feet long. So if you don't have a trolling motor, having that 10-foot, 11-foot rod, if you have one person driving, you're able to kind of stay in the lee. Whereas if you're using a trolling motor, you might only need like a 6 or 7-foot rod. But yeah, especially past the 4th, they patrol it pretty hard. So I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, and then I think there's a safety aspect as well too. I believe I've heard of a story of a boat tied off, and then there was a tide change and not enough attention paid, and a wake went by from another boat, and then before you know it, you got tension, water, and that boat capsized. And so that that turned a great day into a horrible day. So I think the key takeaway is make sure you got the right equipment, you're considering safety, you're fishing in a legal way, not tying off to the bridge. And if you don't have all those things, then obviously we can just book a trip with King Tide and get out there and try to catch a few that way. And I know many of the local charter guides, especially the folks that we talk to on the show, I believe offer that sort of, target species as well. Go back a little bit to the terminal tackle. So we talked about the options of like a dropper loop rig or the Chong's jigs that are great to use, the types of bait. What kind of leader are we using, mono or fluoro? And of the two, what's our pound test that we like?
So what I run is I use 30-pound fluoro as my leader. I don't know if that's standard or not. I mean, we've caught them on cobia rods with 60-pound mono, so I don't know how leader shy they are. I'm sure in certain times it makes a big difference. Some people like going down to 15 or 20. If you end up hooking into a 10 or 12-pound sheep's head, odds are with 15-pound test, if he touches the bridge, you're probably going to be in trouble. So I use this, I don't know what the brand is, but I use this green 30-pound fluoro that I really like. I think it's really hidden in the bay water.
I think unless your name is Randy Morton, you're not catching them on that super light
he's
line.
Using like 2-pound test.
I think he's going after some sort of a world record. I think he might have one or two. Who knows? That guy,
he's got like all of them.
He is a fish whisperer, that is for sure, and one of the kindest gentlemen that you'll ever meet too. I think every time I see him, there's a big smile on his face. It's probably because he's got a big old sheep's head and riding home on a bed of ice. Okay, cool. And then rod and reel, you mentioned that there's 6 or 7 footers, if even your cobia setups, if you've got that spot lock and the ability to stay close to the bridge, or potentially go to Ocean's East and pick up those 10 and 11 foot salmon rods. But as far as like my reel, setup? Is there a max min size? What's the preferred size for catching these sheepshead?
So for the spinning rods, so the 10 and 11 footers are bait casters. I've got
Okay.
2 Shimano Curados. I've had them forever. They're super old, but they're great. They're probably like a 200 size reel. And then for the spinning rods, anything like 2,500, 3,000, they're not going to spool you. So as long as you got something with a little bit of drag that can get their head turned, I think I use with my spinning rod, I'm using like a 7-footer with, I think I've got like a 2,500 Shimano Sustain on it. And that seems to do plenty well.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, and for those listening that aren't sure about some of these actual specifics, you could walk into Long Bay Point and Tackle and talk to Connie or any of those folks in there. They're going to be able to show you how to tie those knots. Any of your local bait and tackle shops will typically help you out with that stuff, and they're going to have plenty of selection for rods and reels. If you tell them, hey, I'm targeting sheep's head and I want something like this, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And then I get that bite. What do I do? Am I swinging like Bill Dance? These things, like what's the mouth like? To get a better hookup ratio, what are some of the things that I need to think about?
The sheep's head mouth, if you've never seen one before, they have molars and front teeth that resemble humans. They are incredibly difficult to hook if you've never done it before. I'm still not the best at it, but we're starting to get better. What I would say, I mentioned it earlier with the tap versus the weight. It's like, if you think that you're too early, you're probably too late. But there's so many times where you're either bumping against a bridge and you think it's a bite, or you feel the tap and if you even move it a couple inches, your odds are you're going to spook that fish. So my main advice, one thing, if you think you had a bite and your crab is still on the hook, you didn't get a bite. And if you thought you had a bite and your crab is on the hook, you probably didn't get a bite. But really, what I've been starting to do the last couple of weeks is just keep the rod tip right on the bridge. And until, if I keep the rod tip about 4 or 5 inches off the water, when you start to feel the taps, and then you'll feel like a little heavier weight, when that rod tip goes into the water, like when it pulls down, kind of lift up a little bit when you feel the weight, and then jam them, because you got to get that hook early.
Yeah, I'm picturing this mouth with all these teeth in it, so it's like you're having to jam that hook, like slide across a couple of teeth first before finding something soft to bury that hook and barb into. And then I'm assuming you guys eat these things, because I've heard they're delicious. Any recommended ways that you like to prepare sheep's head? I think you and I've talked before. Don't you cook a little bit? You know how to throw some fish down, don't you? What's a recommended recipe for sheep's head for those that have never tried it before?
My 2 go-tos, I keep it simple, similar with cobia. I would just take the side fillets, take the skin off, cut the pin bones and the bloodline out, portion it out, and either do butter in a cast iron with some Tony's or any kind of Creole or blackening or whatever seasoning you like, couple of minutes on each side, and then I'll either put it over some like a lemon butter pasta or a sandwich or something. That's kind of the pasta one's my go-to. That thing's pretty good. Or
that sounds good.
I like if you want to fry it, I do a flour water batter and then dip it in panko with any seasonings you like. It's good. But one thing on that note, these fish have become increasingly popular in the last couple of years, and with the emergence of trolling motors and side scan and live scope, they've become very easy to catch. And these fish are, from what I've heard, 15, 20, 25 years old, and you're allowed to keep 4 per person. Only keep what you need. A 10, 12-pound sheep's head is plenty of food. We had 1/2 of one 11-pounder the other day, and I fed 4 people with it. So spear fishermen are putting a hurting on them. Live scopers are putting a hurting on them. If you go out there, my charter limit is 2 per person. You don't need 4. Don't come home with 20 of them unless you have a big fish fry. Just be smart, take what you need, and leave the rest for somebody else.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough for saying that, Jack. That's one of the spirits and the missions of this show is to promote sustainable fishing practices so that we can preserve this world-class fishery for the next generation and generations to come. And it's guys like you doing things like that slowly but surely make the difference. So, just to reiterate, guys, same thing goes for cobia too. It's like, it's exciting to get out there and catch them, but like, how many times have you gone and looked in your freezer and you're like, oh man, that says 2022 on it. That says 2023 on it. Here it is, 2024. Like, think about what your consumption actually is and regulate, your needs accordingly. Just because there's a limit set doesn't necessarily mean that that's what you should kill. So definitely appreciate that. And I think it's admirable that you're keeping a boat limit that is below the actual legal limit. So hats off to you for that, brother.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, man, that was a great report. I think for those that want to target some sheep's head, like myself, maybe in the future when I want to have a couple of, very delicious fish tacos, I run out there. There's a lot of bridge pilings to look at. And actually, you know what? Correct me here if I'm wrong, Jack. Is it pilings or pylons?
I say pilings or poles,
Poles?
but that's just the cobia fishermen. They're on the poles. But
Yeah, they're on the poles. Bridge legs. I don't know. I'm sure there's a technical differentiation between them, but regardless, I run out there. I got a bunch of bridge legs to look at. How do I even know where to start looking where there might be some sheep's head on those bridge poles?
the first thing that comes to mind is, for some reason, I think the pull-off zones that are, if you find, 95% of the poles are 3 legs and 5% of them are 4, 5, 6, sometimes even 7 poles. So if you start there, if you have sonar, great. I use side scan. I don't have the live scope, but the side scan helps. If you go right in between the spans, you can mark them on the right and left, and you'll see them clear as day. There'll be, spots on the side of the poles. It almost looks like a little scatter plot. We've caught plenty without any electronics. It's just a guessing game. I mean, there's realistically, if you talk to the spear fishermen, there's probably sheep's head on every single pole. A couple of weeks ago, we were fishing out by the 4th and we were marking 15 or 20 fish on every pole. And I went back a week later and we weren't seeing anything. So, then all of a sudden you're fishing behind the 2nd and we're marking a bunch and catching them. So I think they do move around. I'm fairly new to it, but been getting into it as much as I can. So go out there. If you got to hit 20 poles before you get into them, do it. But just if you've got the side scan, it definitely makes a big difference.
Yeah. And then just to reiterate for those folks listening, the importance of safety and not tying off, be wise, make some good choices when you're out there and enjoy fishing for them. So Captain Jack, for those that are going to want to get out there and maybe chase these sheep's head or jump on some of those reds and cobias with you, what's going to be the best way for folks to get up with you and book a trip?
If you'd like to get on the books, I would recommend shooting me a message on Instagram at KingTide_charters. That's probably the quickest way to get me. If not, my phone is always open. I prefer a text before a call just because I'm usually on the water. And if I don't answer your call and you do call, leave me a message. That's 757-687-9973. You can also go on Facebook or my website, which is www.kingtidecharternos.com.
All right, Captain Jack, thanks for that information on how folks can get up with you and book a trip. And speaking of booking trips, I understand that there is an opening coming up with you that just happened for the same dates as the ODU Monarch Cobia Classic. So if I want to book a trip with you and enter in a tournament, is that something I can do?
Definitely. Yeah, we fished it. Well, they didn't have it last year, but we fished it the year before, and we fished a couple other tournaments. If you're interested in doing that, it'll be a traditional charter. But if you reach out to me about the tournament, I'm happy to, help out getting in touch with the committee of the tournament, and we can figure out a way to get the entry fee. And I'd love to get y'all out there. I think we got a good shot at winning it this year.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, you guys are out there every day. You're gonna have some great insights on where to go looking for some of those cobias. Book King Tide, and then you can go take care of your entry with the Monarch Cobia Classic folks, and you guys will be in there.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Captain Jack, for that detailed report and insightful information and recommendations on keeping those limits that you take home a little bit less than those legal limits to preserve that great fishery for years to come. That's going to wrap up that report. Guys, let's take a quick break and hear from this week's sponsor. Killer Dock. Most fishermen clean their fish on something like an unsightly old wooden table or the top of a cooler, somewhere that is not comfortable, not sanitary, and not attractive. Killer Dock makes the greatest fish cleaning station known to mankind. They are built from marine-grade aluminum and are corrosion-resistant clear-coated to protect it from the harsh salt environment. Killer Dock makes tables and canopies at several different sizes. So whatever you need on your dock, deck, or patio, they have a fish cleaning station for you. Check out killerdock.com to see more. All right, guys. Well, welcome back. I'm excited to have my good friend Cap Mawson Hain with Fineo Sport Fishing back on the show. Cap Mawson, how we doing, bud?
Good, man. What's going on?
Oh, man, just, getting ready for the weekend. We were just, chit-chatting about the weather for Saturday. I think, the big Cobia East tournament is going to be here, the 15th, and it looks like it's going to be some north winds, and you know how that goes.
Opening season, it's gotta be terrible weather opening season. We've had like freaking 2 weeks of beautiful weather, and then of course June 15th opening season has got to blow. It's got to blow out of the north. It's just it's tradition, you know. Get everybody excited because of good fishing, and then all of a sudden, boom, you can't fish anymore when you can kill them. So
Right. This is why we can't have nice things. Exactly. But I know you've been doing a ton of cobia fishing lately, so I really want to just dive into, what have you guys been seeing this last couple of days? Have you've been out there? Looks like getting on them good every single day.
yeah, this year is, I've been fishing out there for a good 12 years, and this is probably the best start to the year I've ever seen. I mean, maybe not for like, I mean, yeah, we're getting a lot of nice fish, but I mean, there are just so many fish. It's not like, you're going out there and catching 80 pounders every day, but the just amount of cobias anywhere you go. That's the really crazy thing. Like normally you go out there and you pick at them behind the fourth or whatever. But I swear, like I'll go fish for like, oh, let's go drum fish today. Let's go, try some random area. And everywhere you go, there's just cobias. It's been insane. I mean, you literally can't avoid them at this point. Most days, of course, you get some bad weather or something. But if it's decent out, I mean, these fish are everywhere, and they're way bigger than last year too. Like a lot of mid 40-inch class fish. Because last year we were battling that 39-inch club. Every fish was like 39 and 3/4, but this year it's like consistent 46-inch fish. It's been insane. So
Yeah, and comparing last year and the year before to this year, I mean, can you think condition wise or what could possibly be causing such a remarkable difference this year in comparison to years past? I know this is obvious. We're not scientists, but just a popular opinion. What do you think is the cause?
So my personal opinion is, if you remember last year, it was cloudy, very cold, rainy, and very windy, and a lot of northwest winds. And even when the fishing's fantastic, like let's say, you catch 20 cobias one day, the very next day it blows northwest, it shuts that bite down. And it takes like a day or two to recover. And last year it was northwest, 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 northwest every single day. I mean, we got the fish maybe, I don't know, 3 times, possibly even less than that before June. And this year we've had the same consistent weather patterns every single day. Like it's like, it's light winds in the morning, picks up the southeast every afternoon. So I think just the consistent weather patterns and the warmer weather and a lot of sunshine has made the fishing incredible this year.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I just got like, your iPhone like gives you memories and whatnot. I got one yesterday and it was like, June the 11th. And it was like, my picture was like sitting out on the beach and it said, finally feels like June. And it was 82 degrees. And it's like, how is it? It takes till, the second week of June to get a day in the 80s. And you're right. Last year, May was cold and just blowing. And I think you're right. I mean, again, we're not scientists. We're just spectating here and speculating. But I do agree. It has to be something to do with this weather pattern being so good.
I didn't take I ran every charter till I think like June 25th with a sweatshirt on last year. Legitimately. Like, I mean, it was cold every day. And this year, just the great weather patterns. It has to be that. It has to be that. And I think last year just messed up some migration patterns or something. And also something this year is there is bunker in the bay. Like there's bait, there's rays, it just looks alive in the bay. I mean, last year there was no bait till I think I saw my first bunker school like in July, There was no serious amount of bait in the bay. Mm-hmm. And that could also be weather related as well. So it looks just very alive out there. And I think it's the consistent weather patterns for once.
Right. And I think it's important in fishing because sometimes we talk about what I'll call like big details and then sometimes very little details, and all of them, in between impact and influence, outcomes, number of fish we see, et cetera. And one, I'll say maybe smaller detail that I thought about the other day, which is, I really haven't heard of or seen much from the, Omega fleet yet. I have not seen the boats out just yet. And so sometimes I sit around and I just ponder, I've joked in the wintertime driving over the Lesnar Bridge, looking out at the bay. I'm like, oh, I wonder if the fish are thinking about us too, but thinking about them, it's like, as they're making their migration, whether it's from like offshore to inshore or whether from south to north, if there is a lack of presence of bait at the mouth of the bay and the conditions aren't right, perhaps large numbers continue on north and don't make that entrance into the bay. And like you're saying, you're seeing a lot of bait at the mouth of the bay this year. All those things probably are working together to create this, seemingly huge increase in numbers of fish that we're seeing.
I completely agree with that. I mean, sorry, my dog's going crazy. Yeah, no, I completely agree with the bait situation. I mean, bait is everything. I mean, anytime I find bunker or any sort of just bait on the surface, that's just where you're going to want to fish. And last year there was just no bait presence until the middle of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree with you on that. And I have not seen Omega out there this year yet either. And I say yet because every day I fear that that's going to be the end of our fishing just right there, easy access, come out of the inlet. And there's, you find the bait, then you catch the cobias. Everything's great. But every day I fear I'm going to come out there and they're going to be scooping it all up. And, who knows where the cobia is going to go after that. So,
yeah. And we're not going to go too deep into the whole Omega thing, but suffice to say, I think we could all agree we'd be happier to never see them out there again. And for those listening that have, heard us, mention the word bunker a few times, that's kind of or not an acronym, but another name for, the Menhaden, which is that bottom of the food chain that everything loves to eat out in the bay. So switching gears into, you've been seeing them everywhere. So it doesn't sound like we got to think too hard about like, where do I need to go if I'm going to target some cobias, but what have you been successful with in terms of like, what are they eating right now? Are you getting them on artificials or is it purely on eels? Like what's been working these past couple of days?
All right. So I'll give you a rundown because it's actually been an interesting last 3 days that I've fished. So maybe 4 days, whatever. I'll tell you my last couple trips because they've all been kind of different. So I went to, it was Saturday. Yeah, it was Saturday was the craziest amount of cobias I've seen. I went out Saturday and I just went right there behind the fourth island, just putting around in there. And there had to have been 60 to 100. I mean, there was just tons of boats. You know how it gets out there, just a crazy amount of boats. And I was seeing fish. I probably saw 120 cobias in a 6-hour span. I mean, they were everywhere to the point where you couldn't even move the boat. I mean, they were everywhere. And we couldn't really get them to eat much. We were throwing eels. We were throwing bucktails. We were throwing croakers. And so that was just in the mess of boats. So once I pulled out to this, I just said, hey, I'm gonna go to the right of them. And I got about 2 miles away from all the boats. And we primarily caught most of our fish on eels that day. And a couple smaller fish were on jigs, but I would say eels worked really well that day. But as soon as we got back in those boats, it shut off. But then the very next day, this is where it was interesting. It was a really hard southwest wind, really hard. So not a lot of boats were out there. Went back to the same exact spot. Fishing was just as crazy. There were fish everywhere and there were 0 boats. And this was, you always think about this in the back of your head, but you never can really prove it because there's always boats. But there were 0 boats out there and we had a 100% hookup ratio on live eels. I don't know if I've ever truthfully had 100% hookup ratio, but I would say I think we ended up with like 15 or 16 that day. And the first 10 that saw a bait ate, whether it was a jig or an eel, it didn't matter. And then as soon as the wind chilled out, the boats came out, the bite got struggled. And then, it was like here and there having to pick at them. But it was 100% hookup ratio on live eels and jigs that day.
Man, I mean,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, that, again, we're not scientists, but we're just comparing like one day to the next day. The marked difference that I'm hearing you say is like when that boat pressure is there, it has to in some way, shape, or form affect their desire to eat. Maybe they're a little bit anxious or on guard because there's all that, if you've ever stuck your head underwater when a boat goes by, it's loud, so those fish they're hearing all that pressure and then they're seeing all those things getting thrown at them. So, I mean, again, not scientist, but it does sound like there's something to it.
It's like, yeah, like you said, you can't prove it, but man, there's no way it's coincidence. It was wild. It was cool because it was the same customers 2 days in a row. We fished the same spot, and then they got to see the difference between 100 boats and 0 boats out there, and it was night and day difference. I mean, they were. I mean, it was really windy, so obviously not going to be deadly accurate. I mean, they were going out of their way to eat that bait. Wow. And then as soon as that wind died, a bunch of boats come out there, and then it started getting the pick and fest. You see 10, maybe one will lead, whatever the case. But here was the next day was another very interesting one. You know how we talk about, you and me have talked about this before, when the fish are migrating to the bay, they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And once they get into the bay, they kind of get in that spawning mode. I don't know if it's boat pressure, spawning mode, whatever the case. They do get lockjaw. I don't care who you are. I don't care what social media says. A lot of fish just don't eat. It just is what it is, no matter how good you are. And I went to the ocean yesterday because my guy wanted to catch some redfish. And that was yesterday. Yep. So yesterday went to the ocean front, and we get out there, and it's really windy, and we didn't see any reds at first. And I come to the beach, and there was cobias popping everywhere in the afternoon. And since we were drum fishing, I didn't even have live baits. I had 4 bucktail rods, right?
Right.
And I had my guy downstairs, and he's on the front of the boat with a bucktail, and he's never jigged very many cobias. And you could just, these fish, there's no boats out there cobia fishing, and artificial lures, which is like, the bottom of the barrel because you got live baits. And every single fish ate the bucktail.
Come on. That's
just instantaneous. No, you didn't have to jig it. You touched the water and he ate it. So the moral of the story is, I really do believe it's a lot of boat pressure issues with when you get to the situation when they don't eat. So this year, my goal is every time I see a boat, I'm just going to get on plane and drive the other way.
Yeah. Thinking about like all of nature and all of animals, like I've been deer hunting a couple of times, and you watch when animals are feeding, when they're relaxed, they'll drop their head down, they'll feed. When there's any sort of noise or disturbance, they become anxious. And so I got to believe the same is true with fish in some regards, but you're talking about how these fish were just eating when there was no pressure versus just not eating lockjaw when there was pressure. You have those days. Do you ever have them where you're just out there and you just feel invincible? Like that's that day where it's like they'll eat everything, no problem whatsoever. And then other days you're like, I'm just a retarded fisherman and I don't know what I'm doing because they just won't eat. So like for those of us who don't go out as often as you, and when we're having to bounce between choosing a jig to throw or choosing a live bait to throw, the last time you were on, you talked a little bit about how you like to work a jig. Working an eel, like I know there's different methodologies to how to throw an eel and work an eel to try to, induce a bite from a fish that maybe is a little finicky when it comes to eating. Like talk me through some strategies or some different things I can do if they're not just, eating it as soon as it plops in the water next to their face.
Gotcha. All right. So that is a huge thing, is finessing the eel. And I try to explain this to my customers because I get a lot of customers who want to cast and, have it, do the whole process, cast the fish, hook the fish, blah, blah. And it does take them quite a few tries to understand what's going on. But pretty much what I tell them is I like to visibly see the fish eat. So in the eel, when you cast it, it's going to hit the water and it's going to dive straight down. Okay. So if that happens in front of the fish, you don't know what he's doing. You don't know if he ate it. You don't know if he's chasing it. You have no idea. So what I like to do is cast, a little bit past the fish, crank the eel on the surface. No matter how fast you got to crank it, I burn that eel, an inch under the water or skipping on top of the water. Once I get about, 2-3 feet away from the fish, what I do is I pinch the line and I open the bail. And what that's doing is keeping the eel from swimming straight down, so the bail is open so he can have line, but I'm holding the line from coming out with my right hand, if that makes sense. And what I do is kind of twitch the eel up and down. So like I'll let it go down, 2-3 feet, and then I'm holding the line with my right hand and I twitch, and I bring it back to the surface. And I can physically watch that cobia, go down a little bit, come back up, or eat off top of the water. And since the bail is open and I'm pinching it with my right hand, when he eats it, I can let go with the pinch line, and then he's full freeze full. And, now I have confirmed he has eaten the eel. He's swimming away with it. Everything's smooth. I give him, 2-3 seconds. I close that bail, crank the slack up. And when the rod starts to load, I just give him one hook set and we're good to go.
Boom.
But I take a lot of people out there with the eels and, they cast it and the eel swims down before the fish even sees it. And so this eel could be 15 feet down and you're looking at the cobia 2 inches under the surface. He never saw the bait. So I like to visibly, and I know there's a million different ways to do it, but I like to visibly watch the fish eat my bait, so I know everything that's happening.
That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, if you've ever, I've never really like spear dove, but I've dove in the bay before and opened my eyes. And visibility is going to vary, dramatically based on how much sediment's in the water. So we have to remember that like fish visibility is going to be limited accordingly as well too. And I think you and I have been out there a couple of times fishing before too, where maybe you don't get that hook up, and you're like, well, do we think that the fish saw the bait? And it's like, yeah. So it's like, you did your job as long as the fish saw the bait. And so it sounds like what you're talking about there in terms of strategy is just to really ensure that fish sees and engages the bait first, before you try to feed it to them. Anything else, you run the risk of either it not seeing it or the eel going down so fast that the cobia just loses interest.
Yep, I want to make sure that he has seen that bait, like exactly what you're saying, because once that eel goes down and the fish goes down, you have no idea what's happening down there. You don't know if he's spooked from the boat. You don't know if he's even trying to eat it. And another really clear tell with a cobia when he's trying to eat is, like I'm saying, the twitch technique. What I'm doing is I'm twisting it back to the surface, letting it drop about, a couple feet down, twitch it back up. And when a cobia wants to eat, you're going to see that white belly. And pretty much what that means is he's diving down on the bait to eat it. And that's another huge tell with cobia fishing, is being able to read the fish and understand what they're doing. If they just slow sink and you see that brown color slowly sink it down, he's just looking at it. He don't care about it. But if you see that white belly, the white flash going down after it, that means pretty much he will eat something. He will eat, whether it's a croaker, whether it's a spot, whether it's a thread, and it doesn't matter. He will eat something. So I always try to get whatever I do with the twitches or letting it go, I try to get that white belly color, and I know that fish will eat.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great tip. And we've talked a lot about we've talked through in previous episodes about what type of tackle to use. A 7.76, medium heavy fast action rod, a 4 or 5 ish thousand, or 6,000 spinning reel, braid to a fluoro or mono leader, 8-9-aught hook, etc. We've talked a lot about lures and baits to use. I think something that can easily be forgotten about is, and a really important part, especially approaching, the harvest season. Talk me through proper or maybe do's and don'ts when it comes to netting a cobia, because I've seen a lot of mistakes get made, and I've seen a lot of big fish get lost. So when you're on Fineo and Captain Haynes up there at the helm, giving the orders and make things happen, what are your secrets to success when it comes to netting a cobia?
Oh goodness. Well, for starters, we've netted hundreds of cobias, you and me.
Yeah.
And they still suck. I mean, there's no getting around that. They still suck. But the only real pointers I can give you is, especially, so it depends on the real skill of your angler. If you're kind of new to it, if you have an angler that's new and never caught a cobia before, anything big for that matter, what I like to do is stay on the wheel, and pretty much, so the fish eats, I put the boat in forward, and if the fish is off the starboard side, right side of the boat, I just turn the wheel all the way right, and I just bump it, right? And all I'm doing at that point is keeping the fish off the right side of the boat until he's ready to come to the net. Instead of having the angler go from the right side to the left side to the bow, whatever the case, because you never get the net line up. And by keeping the boat in like a slight forward and like neutral, slight forward, neutral, and what you're doing is kind of raising that fish to the surface, because the angler's pulling straight up. And so it kind of just helps him guide the fish to the netting point. Once you get that fish to the netting point, you can go neutral, whatever you need to do, but you want that fish in the back right or the back left corner of the boat. I don't ever let that fish get to the front of the boat, and by bumping you can help that. And as for netting, whenever you grab the net, I see a lot of people do this, and it's just this is the single-handedly biggest tip. When you grab the net, you're grabbing it with the right hand on the handle, grab that mesh from the net and pull it up. Don't have this giant net dragging in the water, because then you lose all your mobility. You take a chance of, especially if the hook is in the corner of the mouth, you take a chance of that mesh getting tangled up with the hook, and then the fish running off and doing all that good stuff. And so make sure you grab that mesh, pull it up to the other hand, and so it's like a clean scoop. And then when you get his head in there, then you can drop the bottom of the net and then pull it up. As for reading the cobia on when he's ready to get netted is another difficult part. If their head is, 2-3 inches down and he's doing that stupid thing where he kind of like is not, like the head bob kind of deal.
Yeah.
That pretty much means if you touch the water, he's about to take 30 feet of line minimum. So I like to, kind of not even risk it at that point. I never go for risky net jobs.
Yeah.
It's pretty much it's a huge gamble because if you go for a risky net job, you can lose the fish, whatever the case. And I like to just let them run back out, come back in until they're completely tired. And have the angler, kind of without high sticking, because high sticking is terrible, just kind of guide the fish's head in there. And when you do eventually get him in the net, you don't want to lift the net horizontally. You want to, do a big scoop. You can get them horizontal there. But when you actually physically lift the fish into the boat, grab the rim of the net, pull it to you, and then lift it vertically, and then lay in the bottom of the boat. A lot of people will net, and then the hoop of the net breaks or the handle because you got a 50-pound fish in there, and it can't withstand that. So make sure you pull it vertically to pull into the boat.
That's a great tip, especially for protecting and preserving your net, but also for, being able to get that net deep and get the head of the fish deep into the net, and then get that upwards motion, secure it in the bottom of the bag, get it close to you, and then lift straight up. I've watched several of your videos when you're netting fish, and I think the best way I could describe it is that, like, at the point that the fish is ready to give up and go into the net, like, the whole process is actually rather calm for the most part. You've worn the fish out. Maybe it's done a couple of, like, quote unquote death circles, and then there's just a moment where the angler's guiding the fish. The head is right at the surface of the water or just above it, and just guided gently into the net in a single, foul swoop, and then boom, it's all done, versus trying to, like, make something happen. And then inevitably you're going to probably, hit the leader or hit the hook, and then you're going to be, crying on your way home about the could have been or should have been fish that you would have caught.
Yeah. One more thing on that. So talking about the risky nets, like, that is, you can maybe go for a risky gaff shot, but obviously can't gaff Virginia anymore. But the risky net shots are probably the number one loser boat side. And a lot of times what I'll do with my mate downstairs, I'm like, I'll tell him where the hook is. If I don't see the hook, I'll tell him, hey, don't even mess with it. Just freaking wait till that fish is dead. Just fight him out till he's floating on the side of the boat. We ain't losing him. If it's on the corner of the mouth, I'll still say, hey, good hook set, but that hook's exposed. Take your time. I try to call out where the hook is because I can see it from the tower to kind of judge how quickly we need to get this fish into the boat. Because if he's hooked, like maybe sometimes outside of the face, something like that, you have a very high chance of losing them. So then maybe you go for some risky net jobs. But watching where that hook is can pretty much tell you how much time you have on that fish.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Risky jobs is a bad thing to do. Bad thing. Impatience, no good.
Absolutely. I think a couple of key takeaways I'm hearing too is, like, for those who maybe aren't on a charter that's a well-oiled machine, if you're out, recreational fishing, is going to be communication between the captain, the angler, and the person holding the net. And if you don't have a plan, and if you haven't discussed it, before you go out there, talk through what the process is going to be, get a plan of action together, stay calm, communicate, and then wait for that, good shot to get that fish in the net.
Yep.
Well, very cool, man. It's exciting to hear about all the numbers that are being seen out there and all the stuff that's happening and going on. So for folks that want to get out with Fineo and you, Captain Mawson, to catch some of these, cobias here in the Lower Chesapeake Bay, what's going to be the best way for folks to get up with you and book a trip?
You can email us at info@fineosportfishing.com. That is FINAO sportfishing. Or you can give us a call at 757-530-4009. Or, of course, we're on Instagram, Facebook, anything like that. Shoot us a message. Check out our pictures. That's just Fineo Sport Fishing, FINAO Sport Fishing. You can find us on pretty much every social media platform. Check out our pictures and live stories every day.
Very cool. And I know in the past you've done some of that Twitch streaming where folks can jump on if they're, bored staring at the computer screens at work all day and want to, get a glimpse of what's going on. Are you going to be doing any of that this summer?
Yeah, I do it when I have like cancellations, or if, let's say, the weather is freaking terrible and I don't want to take a customer out there, I might still go mess around for a little bit. That's our Twitch page, is twitch.tv/Fineo Live. And yeah, we just, live stream our day from start to finish. No editing, no highlights, the real deal world out there. Either they eat, they don't eat, the crazy net jobs, whatever you want to talk about, bad happening, we film it all. So
Yep. That's the essence of this show. We're here to talk about it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Obviously, right now it's been really, really good. But you tune into a live Twitch stream and you're going to see it, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. So,
yep.
Awesome. Well, Captain Hain, thank you so much for being on the show this week. That was an awesome report with what's going on here with the cobias. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. Y'all stick around. Fish bites. Whether you're hitting the bay to catch bait fish using the traditional scent strips or fishing the rivers or marshes for speckled trout, red drum, and flounder, Fish Bites has something for you. Family owned and operated in St. Augustine, Florida, they pride themselves on making reliably consistent fishing products for anglers of all ages around the world. Fish Bites baits and lures are made with pride in the Sunshine State, USA. Check out the full line of scented saltwater and freshwater baits at fishbites.com. All right, guys. Well, I could not think of a better segue into this next segment than that discussion with Captain Austin Hain about all things cobia fishing in the Lower Chesapeake Bay. It is tournament season. It is exciting. There is a lot of money on the line. So let's jump into this conversation talking about the 2024 Monarch Cobia Classic. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this very special segment. We are talking to Kim Johnson and Mark Lozier about the 2024 Monarch Cobia Classic. How are we doing, guys? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm doing well.
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
So, Kim, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for the ODU Alumni Association.
Sure. So I am the Director of Alumni Relations here for the ODU Alumni Association. I'm actually celebrating my 6th anniversary here at ODU today, June 10th. And I work with just engaging our alumni. So we've got over 172,000 alumni around the world. So I work with our staff here to figure out various ways that we can engage and keep them connected to ODU. And then I oversee our 3 signature events, with Monarch Cobia Classic being one of them. And the 3 signature events are to raise funds for scholarships. So we always have a lot going on throughout the year. We range anywhere between 90 to 110 events per year, sometimes more. So we stay busy.
That's awesome. And congratulations on the 6-year anniversary.
Thanks.
And Mr. Mark, how are we doing today? Tell us a little bit about yourself and who you're with.
I'm with her. I work for Ocean's East. I've been in the tackle industry for a long time, fished in the Tidewater area since the 80s. So been around here a long time. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, Mark, Ocean's East is a staple here in the local fishing world, and we know that you work real hard and some long hours to make sure that we have all the supplies we need to go out there and catch that big one. And speaking of the big one, we've got this big 2024 Monarch Cobia Classic coming up. We skipped that year before, but we are so excited it's back. It's probably one of the most exciting events that I've been to when it comes to fishing tournaments. So, Mark, I want to dive into some of the rules, and then later, Kim, we're going to talk about some of the sponsorship opportunities and how this benefits, ODU AA. But Mark, let's just start off with like some of the basics. If I'm new to this tournament, don't really know what I'm getting into, what's kind of the basics? What is this single biggest fish? What are the rules around that this year?
Well, in the past, it was biggest fish, but now we've changed it this year. And so it's going to be a bag of 2 days. So your biggest fish from day 1 and your biggest fish from day 2, aggregate combined, and that's going to decide the winners and second, third, and so forth. So we did that for a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons was 2 years ago, if you remember, there was 2 73-pound fish caught on day 1. It was crappy weather, and so not a lot was going on. And then the second day, that was a big number to beat. So it seemed like the energy wasn't as high for everybody. People weren't out there because beating 73 was a toughie, right? You were fighting for third, really, because those 2 fish was ounces in between in a matter of minutes and time. So you were just looking for third and after for that. So make it a little more challenging and make both days more competitive, if you will. So.
Yeah, I like that. That's a cool change. It's like somebody's going to have to get struck by lightning twice, not just once, so to speak.
Correct.
I know like last year we had that June 15th tournament, and I think somebody threw an 83 pounder up on the scales at the very, first part of the day and it was like, well, the game's just kind of over, you know? So I think that's a really cool change to keep things exciting, keep the energy high for both day one and day two, because you just never know. You might get that, 65, 70 pounder on day two, plus your 45 pounder day one, and there's your winning bag.
Yep, that was a reason.
So that's going to be for the main prize, which I think, Kim, remind me, we've got first through fifth place.
Correct. Yep. First through fifth cash prizes.
And, I think most folks are always thinking about the big trophy. What's that worth? The number one spot?
It will depend on what we have coming for registrations as well as sponsorships in Calcutta. So we'll know the first day of the tournament how much money that top prize is going to be. So we will definitely share it with the public so that that number is out there, so that people will know going into the dock party what that number one team has winning.
Very cool. I'm sure it'll be a big number, especially seeing the sponsorships that we have out there. And right now, the forecast is looking like there's going to be some sunshine, for those sight fishermen. So I hope we see a huge turnout this year with folks competing. You mentioned Calcuttas. I remember my first fishing tournament, the idea of a Calcutta and these levels, it kind of like twisted my brain up a little bit. Mark, help me understand how the Calcutta levels work and what the prices are. How do I get into all of them? Or if I only do a couple, what's the process there?
Well, basically, Calcutta is just a side bet within the actual tournament itself. So, and it's really nothing more than putting more money in on the side. So we have 3 levels of Calcutta. So it'll be in level 1. I don't even know the payouts right now. Go ahead. But anyway, level 1, 2, and 3. And then you have to be in level 1 to get in level 2 to get in level 3, and so on. So, and basically it's just that. It's just a little gamble on yourself. So, and it gives you another advantage because sometimes some people don't get in on a Calcutta. And I've seen tournaments where people who win don't win as much as the people who get into Calcuttas because first place team didn't get into Calcutta. But then second place guy may have gotten it all in. So that's 2 days at 3 Calcuttas a day, 6 Calcuttas, and he got second place. So financially, he took over the first place guy, but he didn't get first place on the trophy. So it's just a little side bet on the whole event.
That makes sense. So what I'm hearing you say is if I'm going to fish this thing, I might as well just be
You
on.
might as well. I mean, you're in it, right? I mean, you got to think you're dividing it up between 4 people on a boat. So, I mean, you can kind of play around with the money, but either way, it's just something else to do. Adds a little more to it at the end of the night, every night too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be exciting. I think, fishing's an expensive hobby as it is. So, by the time you consider everything, you might as well throw the money in and see what happens. So talk to me about the rules this year we got lines in, line out. What are my time frames for fishing each day?
6 to 4. You have to be in line by 4 p.m. When the scales close at 4, if you're in line, well, obviously weigh your fish. And then, but if you come up to the dock at 4:01, you're out. So make sure you're watching your time.
Can we define coming up to the dock? Do you just need to see me? Do I need to honk? What's that process?
I always post somebody at the dock at 4 o'clock. And if you don't if you're not there at 4 o'clock, he's going to let you know you didn't make it. So as long as we see if you're on the dock and you're pulling your fish out and coming up at 4, we're good. But yeah, if you're doing 80 miles an hour down Long Creek at 4 o'clock, that's not seeing you. You have to be on the dock.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about the rules. There are 2 weigh stations, one at Long Bay Point and Wallace's Bait and Tackle in Hampton. So all fish have to be brought by water too. So.
Oh, okay. So no trucking your fish in. It's got to be brought by water.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. 10-4. That's a good rule to note because I think several tournaments do offer the trucking option. So folks listening in, note that, you can't plan on coming in by truck. You got to get in there by water in order to be counted. And I'm so glad, Kim, that you guys reached out to Tony at Wallace's Bait and Tackle and got them engaged, because I've been that guy catching a fish at 3 o'clock out by the third island and having to take something up to, Sarah's Creek in Yorktown by water. And that is a hike. So if I'm fishing out of Yorktown, Peninsula, Gloucester, Windmill Point, I've got that option conveniently right there at Wallace's Bait and Tackle. If you're out of Rudy or Little Creek or Lynnhaven Inlet, anywhere on the south side, you've got the convenience right there with Long Bay Point and Tackle. And for those who've maybe not been to Long Bay before, it's about a 15 to 18-minute ride once you're inside the inlet. So plan accordingly. And then last, question for you, Mark, about the tournament rules and plans. what's going to happen if we maybe have like a small craft advisory, in effect come Saturday? What's the protocol for that?
Well, if it's unfishable completely, then I guess we have never had that situation. So, and that's a good thing about making it a 2-day event. So at least if it falls on one of the two, we can wrap it all up in one day if we have to. But let's just don't even jinx us with that question.
No, right now I'm going to just pray for that typical hot, humid south wind July weather that we normally have. Mark, any other unique things about this year when it comes to the rules and the fishing?
No, I think everything else is pretty much standard like all tournaments. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory in the rules themselves. You can get a copy of them obviously online, but yeah, it's pretty much 101 tournament fishing as far as that goes. I think Kim has something that I'm pretty excited about that she can share after, though, about the where we're having it. I'm just as excited about that as anything else. So.
Yeah, I am too. And for those listening too, we're going to have all the links in the show notes to tournament rules, sponsorship, registration, all that jazz. So, Kim, switching gears, you mentioned ODU Alumni Association. You guys have 172,000 plus alumni that you all assist with this program. Tell us a little bit, who is this really benefiting and what do these funds do for ODU Alumni Association?
Yeah, so we started the ODU AA, meaning ODU Alumni Association Scholarship Fund over 10 years ago. And so that is made up of various scholarships that can support students that, would like to attend school at ODU, get higher education, and just need financial support. I hate to hear when there is a student who wants to attend classes and they just cannot swing it. So the 3 signature events we do every year, any proceeds we have go into that fund to be able to help them with offsetting costs to be able to attend school here.
That's super cool to hear. I mean, knowing that there's a philanthropic arm to this tournament and that us, if you got a boat and you can go fishing, you're probably not paycheck to paycheck. So it's really cool to know that the funds are going to help those in need that really want to achieve and grow in their life and get that above average education at ODU. I'm really, really excited to hear about this tournament event space this year. So tell the folks listening, where are we having this party? Where's this going down?
So the party is going to be at the ODU Sailing Center, which is on the backside of campus. It's actually my favorite spot on campus. It's on the Elizabeth River. So if you were going down Powhatan on the back of campus where the tennis courts are, it's situated back there. Lots of parking, huge parking lot back there. So people will not have a problem bringing their trailers and their boats back there if they're coming straight to the dock party. In the past, I think anywhere in Hampton Roads really is going to be tricky with parking. This is the last thing we have to worry about this year. Also, it's just going to be a beautiful atmosphere. So we'll have tents set up out there. We'll have music, we'll have food, we'll have raffle, and are just looking forward to having a big party out there on the water and to be able to enjoy a summer night and to give some good prizes away.
Yeah, and I know you guys mentioned there's going to be some fun prizes like for the lady anglers and the kids. There's going to be some things given away, and then there's a lucky dog prize, I think. Is that correct?
Yep, lucky dog just means if you were a registered team, you get thrown into the pot, and we pull, and that person gets a prize. So we have that, and we also have heaviest fish. So that's any fish that is not a cobia, shark, or stingray. So we'll base it off of that too. So prize for that as well.
And that's a fun little category, especially if maybe you've had a slow day and or maybe you caught a nice fish early on. But I think in years past, Mark, remind me, I know one funny one. I remember Ben Shepard with above average sport fishing weighed one of those what do they call them? Hogfish or ribbon needlefish. It only weighed a couple of pounds, but I think everyone forgot to fish for something and they
Was it a ribbon? Was it a ribbon?
It wasn't a ribbon. It was like, I think it was a needlefish or a hogfish.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
houndfish.
Marsh Hannum. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, well, and then I think a year before there was like
I had a big oyster toad one time. I think.
That's what it was. An oyster toad. It was like
yeah.
2 pounds, and it's like, that was worth money. So, if you're a sheep's head fisherman or flounder fisherman or, any of those other fish, a black drum, I know one year with Aubrey Williams from Looking Hook. So remember that's a fun extra category to go for. I'd love to see some more fish in that category weighed aside from just a boring old oyster toad. Yeah, and then, looking at a map here, one of the things that I think is a nice benefit of the ODU Sailing Center is when you look at the Greater Hampton Roads region and you kind of pick like an epicenter, that area is kind of right in the middle from South Virginia Beach all the way up to Hampton, Yorktown. For those coming in with truck and trailer, it's going to be a nice kind of center point for everybody getting together. And then you mentioned some food and music. What else can we look forward to at the after party?
We are going to have a lot of different raffle prizes that will be there as well. We're going to do a 50-50 cash raffle. So another opportunity if you want to walk away with some cash. And yeah, we were thinking about maybe doing some other types of contests that's TBD. So those may end up being some surprises that night.
Try your karaoke skills, Luke.
Some karaoke. Oh man, you get a couple of beers and some local fishermen and then throw some karaoke on that could be worth showing up for. But I'm also hearing that I need to bring some cash, line my pocket with some cash so I can get in on these 50-50 raffles and other raffles that are going to be available too. And then for those out there who maybe have a business locally that want to get involved and sponsor the ODU Monarch Cobia Classic, what do we have available and how can folks get involved with that, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have sponsorship levels that range all the way from $250 up to $10,000. So now we have a 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,500, and 5,000. And so what we do with those sponsorships is give those companies exposure, and that's through our social media channels with the ODU Alumni Association. So right now, I think we have close to 11,000 followers on Facebook and over 4,000 on Instagram. So we're really trying to promote our sponsors through social media, as well as in the program book for the tournament, signage out there during the captain's meeting and the dock party, any way that we can promote them. They're currently on our posters. We're going to have them on the t-shirts. So all of those sponsorship highlights are on the website. So if anybody is interested, it's all highlighted right there. We are still taking sponsorships because, of course, we don't want to turn anybody away. We want to raise as much money as we can. So still definitely accepting those if we have companies interested.
Awesome. And folks that want to do that, again, we're going to have it in the show notes. You can reach directly out to Kim via email and get set up with your sponsorship. It's a great opportunity to expose your business to local anglers and through those social channels to the folks that tune into the Alumni Association. And then, of course, those funds are going to an amazing cause. You mentioned the captain's meeting earlier. Mark, I just want to get a clarification on that. So we are having captain's meetings at both weigh-in stations. Is that correct?
Captain's meeting will be at the same place that your dock party will be at Thursday night.
Okay, so also at the sailing
You'll
center.
get to see where you're going to be coming to when you come back for the for the dock party on Saturday night.
Perfect.
Not everybody has to attend. I mean, obviously, captain should attend, right, or whatever. But yeah, it's welcome for everyone. But yeah, somebody from the team better be there.
Right. So one person from the team must be at the captain's meeting to be registered and
send the one who pays the most attention
to the details. Absolutely. Well, man, I'm so excited about this event. It's going to be a lot of fun. Excited just for the event itself at the Sailing Center and having that big party afterwards. A 2-day tournament is always a ton of fun because, if day one you don't catch the one you're going for, it's cool to know now that one that you catch on day one is part of that bag. I think that really adds a really cool element to this tournament this year. Anything else before we wrap up this segment for the ODU Monarch Cobia Classic 2024?
Just to note that registration right now is the early bird pricing, and that's until July 1st. So it'll go up $50 after July 1st. So definitely encouraging people to go ahead and register now to save a little bit of money. And included in the registration are t-shirts for the whole team, bucket full of great supplies, as well as the tickets to the dock party. So you get that all included within your registration.
That's a nice perk. So I get what? How many? 4 tickets
Yes.
to the dock party? So just registering alone, I get my bucket, t-shirts, swag, and tickets to the dock party.
Right.
That's a really great value.
Yeah.
Mark, any parting words to us fishermen before we wrap up?
Good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah.
How about the
only thing I think about, it's tournament season, right? There's Cobia tournaments from now on, right? This Saturday's opening day on the 15th, and it just goes right on through. Remember, some of those ones you put back might come back to help you later. So killing all your big ones in the beginning. Not saying you're going to see the same fish again, but I just think about all these guys that are out there now fishing all these tournaments hard and beating the bay up pretty hard for big fish every weekend. So think about it.
That's a very important part of this show as a whole, which is the sustainability of this world-class fishery. So I really appreciate that comment. Austin Hain, Jack Limroth, others have talked about the importance of, letting some of those fish go. And I would definitely agree with you that those bigger fish, those breeders that are, out there swimming around, put them back. I know like Zach Hoffman, for example, they release a lot of the larger fish. And, that's a big part of keeping this fishery healthy for generations to come. So thank you for that pro tip. Well, y'all, that's going to wrap up a really great segment talking about the 2024 Monarch Cobia Classic. So whether you're competing or want to become a sponsor, just check the links in the show notes to get started. We're going to take a quick break and hear from this week's sponsor. So that's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free AFTCO Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.